Good morning. Welcome into 104.5 The Zone. How's everybody doing on this Wednesday? We got a lot of things to talk about. Titans make it official. Brian Callahan is your new head coach. Congratulations to him. Congratulations to his family. It comes in a press release with all manner of other news regarding the organizational structure, the org chart of the Tennessee Titans and their front office. 615-737-1045. You can jump in if you want. We'd be happy to have you. Your thoughts on what you heard from Burke Nihill, who was just on with Ramon, Kayla, and Will this morning, the Titans CEO and team president. I know he expanded on a variety of different things. You'll hear from Burke. We'll play some of that audio for you later on in the show. And what you have in front of you now with your head coach made official. You have a press conference time finally, 1 o'clock tomorrow. We will, of course, carry that live here on The Zone, so that'll be right off the top for Blaine and Mickey. We'll probably end our stuff a little early so that we can get them set up in time to carry that press conference live for you. Good morning, bud.
Good morning on a newsy Wednesday.
Very newsy Wednesday. So, where to begin? Because the Callahan thing, it's new news, but it's old news. Where else do you want to dive in here? Because we have roles, we have defined roles, we have structure. We like structure. Yes? Question mark. Do we care anymore? Are you tired of us talking about it? I'm tired of talking about it.
It feels pretty important.
Well, sure. So who is it important to, though? I mean, it's important for them, obviously, like the Titans. And just to kind of expand on what we're talking about here, Rand Carthon receives a promotion, as does Chad Brinker. Rand Carthon is now the executive vice president. As a part of his general manager role, he has full oversight over the football operations. Chad Brinker is now president of football operations, which is a promotion from assistant general manager of strategy, which was his role last year. So, a lot of different news there. Now, it's important for them. I agree. I think it's important for you and I and everybody else whose day-to-day involves discussing this thing and how decisions are made and what decisions get made correctly and what decisions don't pan out and who's responsible, who to hold responsible for those decisions. Do fans care?
Yes. Yes.
Are you sure?
Yes. Do fans care about who is picking out the product that will be placed on the football field for their Tennessee Titans? Yes, Buck. Yes.
I don't think that's true.
Oh, you don't think that's true?
I think they just care how it gets done.
Yeah, fans don't care who the general manager is, right? When the Titans were looking to replace John Robinson, everybody was aloof about it. Like, yeah, who cares?
No. Who the general manager is different. How the sausage is made now, some people do. And listen, fans are as educated, as informed, as caught up on this stuff, ahead of a lot of us on some of this stuff, as in any other time in media, because of social media, because of access, because of all these different things, all these great resources that teams pay top dollar for. And also you can get a Pro Football Focus subscription and be a part of the dialogue as well, in the same way that a lot of these teams operate to an extent.
Buck, were you a football fan growing up? Who was your team?
I didn't have
in the NFL. You didn't have one? No. I did. Yes. Fans care.
Okay.
Fans care.
Okay. So I like the idea of defined roles, and it's Amy Adams Strunk delivering on something that she said in the video that we have referenced several times, the hostage video with Mike Keith, speaking on the day of Mike Vrabel's firing and her promise to define these roles based on how last year's structure, a little bit of a house of cards situation.
I'm not quite ready to answer that question. I still have some things to work through, but I will answer both those questions at the end of the process.
So when it's done, you'll make this clear publicly who the head coach reports to and who has control of the roster.
Absolutely, yes.
Absolutely, yes. Now, it's important to follow that up with a question that we asked Rand Carthon. Now, Lucas doesn't have the audio of this, but it was in his transcript. Him talking about, well, it doesn't matter, and I'm paraphrasing here, doesn't matter if Amy defines the roles. How important, basically he was asked, how important is it to you to have these roles defined with a new head coach, whomever that would be. This was prior to Callahan. This was on the day that Mike Vrabel, the announcement of Mike Vrabel's firing. And he said basically, the defined roles situation, that's just about ego. That's not important to me, no matter if Amy puts us in a defined position or not as a front office structure and as a head coaching staff. My role here is still going to be to work with the coaching staff in the most collaborative, C-word, way possible. And so that is still the approach that's going to be taken. The only difference is now we no longer have to sit here and talk about it and think about it and wonder who's actually responsible for Andre Dillard. Was it Rand? Was it Mike? Whose fault is that? Who was actually interested or standing on the table for Will Levis or Tajay Spears? Was it Rand? Was it Mike? Whose decision was that? All these different things that they wouldn't answer questions about, that Rand didn't do a press conference about all year long because it's Mike Vrabel's team. And now do we not feel like we're in a more relaxed spot where more of the discourse can flow freely about how it is that this thing works?
Yes. And this feels like somewhat of an acknowledgement that the setup last year did not work for obvious reasons. Does it feel like a course correction almost?
Sure. Well,
because there's no doubts about the structure now. All there was doubt about the structure a year ago.
Well, to hear people in the organization tell it, this was something that, maybe they didn't handle the best way last year. Burke Nihill, Titans team president, he was just on the morning show. He spoke about the nature of that structure with them.
Yeah. Look, I think we'd acknowledge there was a bit of lack of clarity last year, and that just wasn't acceptable moving forward. There needed to be stability. There needed to be clarity around who was doing what in the building. But structure at the end of the day isn't what's going to create alignment and collaboration, some of those buzzwords you hear out there. It's the people, but at the same time, the structure needs to be clear. And so we've arrived at a clear structure and a way forward that we believe is going to build a championship program. Rand Carthon was the template last year in terms of a general manager that Amy was looking for to take our organization into a different generation of the NFL. His experience, his skill set, his network was exactly what she was looking for. And there's a palpable sense of excitement letting Rand do more. He's earned it. He last year did a great job in the role that we were asking him to do, building a roster in a shared experience with the head coach. But we think that he's got just a lot more to offer in terms of building an entire program, to building a team, to developing a team, to leading a team that includes full roster control, includes oversight of the head coach, and just going after it and getting it on the grass, building a great championship team.
Well, that sounds a lot more clear. Thanks for that, Burke. Truly, I don't know why that was so hard. Well, I do know why it was so hard, because the other guy wanted it a different way. And last year's structure was kind of the concession. Okay, what was the discourse around Mike Vrabel? That he didn't think Rand Carthon, that he liked Rand Carthon, that they got along fine, that there was never animosity between the two men. But Vrabel's expectation, he was never promised this, it was my understanding, but his expectation was that Cowden was going to be the general manager, the guy that he had worked with, John Robinson's number 2. And when they came to him with the hire of Rand, the idea of, well, love the guy, maybe an assistant general manager. That makes more sense for him. I don't know that he's I'm not using exact quotes here, but basically the situation that played out, he didn't think Rand was ready. They put together whatever the hell that was last year, the axis of evil. It didn't work. It fell flat on its face because turns out you need defined roles, you need structure. And while it is harder to keep somebody like Mike Vrabel in check, especially when you've empowered him the way that you have, time in and time out, that's on you. To make the course correction at the time when they did is what Amy Adams Strunk thinks makes the most sense for this thing moving forward, to get the best version of it moving forward. We'll see how it plays out. I'm fascinated to ask questions tomorrow at 1 o'clock at the press conference of both Callahan and Carthon. And, you know, to summarize on Rand stuff that you just heard Burke Nihill say, you see all those memes about let Rand cook? That's how you summarize this. They're going to let Rand cook. 615-737-1045 is how you jump in. We will talk about how refreshing this new era seems to be for a lot of people in that building where stagnation had kind of set in. Going to give you some examples of that coming up next. I'm Buck Rising. It's 104.5 The Zone. Welcome back to the show. Titans announced their new head coach, their new front office structure. Press conference tomorrow. We are going to have it on the air for you in some form or fashion. We're going to have coverage, all throughout the course of the day tomorrow. I'm sure there will be interviews with the interested or interesting parties as a result, whether that's with us, whether that's with 3HL, whether that's with any of the other shows. Burke Nihill, great interview this morning with The Morning Show. You can check that out via their podcast. You can also see all the interviews they do. I assume Bert is posting that on YouTube, yeah?
Yeah, I think you can expect, you're talking about the Burke Nihill, right?
Yes.
Yes, I think you could expect that on YouTube very shortly.
Well, the other interview apparently, because like the YouTube chat, and listen, taking the Zone TV chat, and again, I feel like I say this once a day. We love you. We love you. You're all insane people, but we love you. You can live stream the show on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. All 4 shows. The Zone TV chat is blowing me up about this Wesley Woodyard interview. Is that also on YouTube? Because I haven't heard this yet, but apparently there's a bunch. He's just throwing a bunch of grenades, a lot of Vrabel stuff from the former player's perspective. So I mean, I'd be interested to hear what he said.
I know the podcast is already up.
Okay, so I haven't had an opportunity to hear that yet. Chad Casual says, "Don't patronize us." I have to. I'm scared of you. That's why I patronize you. So no, I haven't heard the Woodyard interview yet. I had some meetings this morning before the show. Obviously, the news got swept up in that this morning as well, about 9 o'clock. So apologies. I'm a little behind on it, but I will catch up, and we will discuss potentially tomorrow.
Yeah, not a glowing endorsement of Mike Vrabel.
Okay.
From Wesley Woodyard.
Is there anything new? Do I need to know anything new about what Wesley Woodyard said? Because I know Wood has, and I love Woodyard. He has been on the radio station before. He has talked about a lot of these things, disagreements, how Mike Vrabel managed things, and this is not new news to me to find out that Mike Vrabel is polarizing. I know coaches have left because of that. I know players have left with bad tastes in their mouths after dealing with Mike, and I know there's a lot of people that love him. He's a very, very polarizing guy. So is there new information in there that I immediately need to know and discuss right now?
Just elements of the Vrabel tenure that Woodyard wasn't happy with. I would go back and listen to it before we discuss it. But
okay.
The biggest takeaway is, the polarizing nature of Vrabel. Players seemingly either loved him or hated him, and the rigidity of Mike Vrabel, which is no surprise to us.
I was going to say, I just spent 6 years. I know all about the areas of rigidness and tightness and control freak. I know all about it.
No, and once you get a chance to listen to the whole thing, and I caught the majority of it driving in, but once I also get a chance to listen to the whole thing, I think the opportunity to talk about it in the context of how much of a departure Brian Callahan is from what Mike Vrabel was and everything Woodyard laid out is certainly of note.
Okay. Well, then we'll have that discussion tomorrow. So apologies for me not being quite caught up on that. 615-737-1045 is how you join the discussion. So to that same extent, though, before we talk about, Vrabel to Callahan and what that is going to look like, what that kind of fosters. So talked about this last week when Lucas asked me a question, what's the biggest misstep or the biggest swing and miss that Amy Adams-Strunk has had, right? That was the correct context?
Yeah.
And I had to think about it because initially my reaction was, well, you greenlit the A.J. Brown trade, and then it kind of felt like people were walking it back around Amy Adams-Strunk. Was she fully informed? Now, you greenlit the A.J. Brown trade. It's still on you as much as it's on the person that traded him. But then, after we talked it through a little while, I kind of came to the conclusion that maybe the biggest misstep that she had is not moving on from Vrabel sooner after she moved on from John and trying to make last year's structure that did fail work. We made sure that we included, the level of nuance that's required, which is that Amy Adams-Strunk likes Mike Vrabel. Wanted to keep him as a head coach until things kind of wore on throughout the course of the season. A variety of different events built up to where that relationship deteriorated. Easy for me to say. And kind of put her in a position where she said, okay, enough. We'll rip the Band-Aid off, but the Band-Aid might have been a year late. Because there's some level of staleness to it, right? That it felt like set in at some point. It's tough to describe, and the losing is what is it at the core of it, the poor roster conditions. Like, they were a franchise that has bottomed out in the last 2 seasons. And by the way, to bottom out with 7 and 6 win seasons, I'm not saying that's any kind of consolation prize, but you're not the worst team in the league, but your owner still necessitates a change. It's a higher standard that the Tennessee Titans, as an organization, I feel like, in my time covering them, have held themselves to. Do you feel like that's fair? Where we talk about Philadelphia, Sirianni is firing both coordinators, moving on, presenting a plan as to why Jeff Lurie, I should keep my job after we just went to the Super Bowl last year and made the postseason again, but got embarrassed in Tampa Bay. Philadelphia is a different standard. Ownership holds their coaching staff to a different standard than a lot of other places. The Titans haven't necessarily treated themselves like that across their entire existence, but that has been a trend that you've seen under Amy, right? She continues to want more out of this. That is a good sign for fans, whether you liked the Vrabel change or not, that your owner is not willing to be complacent. How those decisions play themselves out, nobody can say right now. Just as you couldn't say in 2018 whether Mike Vrabel would make this an infinitely better situation. He did for a period of time. He no longer did. They made a change. So now we'll see how much further they can elevate themselves. I just like the idea of her holding her product to a higher standard than I think a lot of people talk about the Tennessee Titans with. She's probably, in the same way that fans get bothered about, well, when the Titans beat an opponent, when the Titans beat the Bills, it's about what's wrong with the Bills, not about how the Tennessee Titans did this, or the Tennessee Titans as an organization, or the Baltimore Ravens are a gold standard type of team in today's NFL, or all these different things, right? Titans aren't talked about that way. People were getting upset in the last couple of days in the news cycle because apparently, and listen, I see this stuff on social media. I don't know how real it is amongst all of you, but when you see Brian Callahan being discussed as the Titans hire, you haven't necessarily loved the tone of how people have been discussing outside of Nashville Brian Callahan as the Titans hire, looking at it differently or talking about it differently because he was hired by the Titans as opposed to what Brian Callahan was as a candidate before he took that job. I've seen a lot of that feedback in the last couple of days. So I'm sure the owner, who was pissed about losing to the Texans in Houston Oilers uniforms, has that level of, hey, bleep you guys too, all right? We're better than that. We think we're better than that. We're going to hold ourselves to a higher standard than that. That is the trend that this thing seems to be taking, and I'm fascinated to see whether this is a gamble that pays off for her.
You know what I feel like we got today?
What's that?
Their vision.
Oh, God. Can I get rid of that one, too?
Had to be patient for it, but here it is, right? I mean, the email from Titans PR, Amy's statement, quote, "This is not my father's NFL. As our league continues to evolve in areas like analytics, sports science, and technology, football organizations have become more complex and multifaceted. I want our football operation to be at the forefront of the NFL as teams continue to find new competitive advantages."
That is all that you need to know, and that's her statement from this morning.
From this morning,
the latest statement,
that's
announcing
a part of the statement.
Announcing, yeah, it's a whole big long statement. We can read it for you in its context, but that's a very important part that Lucas just highlighted because it speaks to what so many of you want, right? It speaks to what my biggest complaint was yesterday, or my biggest ask of the new head coach: just score points, figure out how to do it efficiently, be less arcane, and I know people don't want to hear it because it looked terrible last year. They tried to take steps in that area to that effect last year. It wasn't enough. They got cleared out as a result. They weren't willing to do enough or lean into enough of the stuff that the rest of the organization, collaborative, weren't willing to do enough of that stuff to head in the direction that they want to as one unit, as opposed to coach here, GM here, who's responsible for this and that. Here's a team president and an owner. Are you being disrespectful to to the team owner in how you're making demands of things or how you're going about this or expressing yourself in ways that are very Mike Vrabel, but also, tread a little lightly.
I mean, to their credit, I feel like the overwhelming reaction after they fired Vrabel and we didn't get much from Rand Carthon in the press conference and this nebulous idea of a vision that wasn't laid out, we were all sitting around like, okay, whatever the next step is, show us what direction you're going in.
Have a plan.
Yeah, well, okay, you better have a plan. Looks like they have a plan. And it's been laid out today.
Now, they're never going to express, at least talking to people privately, right? They're never going to express, oh, what a disaster. We don't know what we're doing. I mean, some people did. So there are people in that organization that were not crazy about the direction that things were heading, that didn't love the Mike Vrabel firing. Because, again, he's a super polarizing figure. He's got people that love him in there, right? Just as not everything is popular, not everything is popular by consensus, no matter what segment of society that you're looking at. Firing Mike Vrabel was not a completely popular view inside the building. Not a fair, not too far of a reach, right? But when you have a situation like this, and you've articulated, at least internally, right? They don't have to tell us these things in a press conference. It's why media was bitching about it the way that they did, because we wanted the answer then. We wanted to know, all right, you've done this. Clearly, you must have a plan. If you do have a plan, here's the time to let us know to an extent. You don't have to give away your hand. You don't have to tell us, all right, I love Brian Callahan here. Would love Thomas Brown as the offensive coordinator. If we can't get him, here's where we're going to go. Not asking for that, but just stuff that's outlined in the statement. Maybe they felt it was premature to do that with Rand Carthon's press conference. It does no good to revisit.
And the head coach is a massive part of that plan.
It is.
And now they have that. And now they've laid it out.
But I think, are we not in agreement that this should have been the approach no matter who the head coach is? Now they have to find the head coach to kind of
piece it all together.
You know what I'm saying? Like, the head coach is a big piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
But you got the vast majority of the puzzle filled out. Like, you can give me a little guidance here. You know what I'm saying? You got the outline. You got the frame. But you're correct. Now they can more fully put it into practice as opposed to just, speaking about things in a tangential sense and move forward with how they want this to go, because they know the coach, they know what the vision is, they know what system that they have bought and paid for with the coach, whose demeanor is one that they can work with within this structure that they have set up, defined roles or not. And the roles are defined, thank God.
Also feels like on the way to the priority of winning championships, they want to change the way the Titans are viewed across the NFL. Feels like we're entering a very different new era of Titans football.
Brother, they're trying to Silicon Valley the Titans. That's what this is. This is a rebrand. In every sense. You have been big, brutish, Derrick Henry, larger than life, tough guy, Mike Vrabel. Little bit of 5 o'clock shadow after just shaving 2 hours ago, right? That's the Tennessee Titans. Okay, you can still be that. You can still be bigger, stronger, faster, and all those things. But you're going to use science to help drag you into the modern era the way that all these other teams, or the teams that you want to emulate, the teams that are doing it at the highest level, you've outsourced. The Tennessee Titans are becoming something that the population of Tennessee hates. California transplants.
What are you talking about?
Bring them all in. The amount of people that live in this state that bitch about people moving here from California. All the different companies that are moving here from California, all the different people that are moving here from California, things like that. The East Coast, the West Coast, the coastal movement that's coming here to Nashville because jobs in the city's growing, and it's a thing. Lucas, the world is happening around you. This is a thing that's.
Wait, sorry, I'm so confused on where you're going with this.
How?
Wait, what are you talking about?
You live in East Nashville. You should identify this with this more than everything.
We're talking about football.
No, I know, but I just think it's funny, the irony of what they're trying to turn into. It's the thing that the populace that lives here has said that they hate.
They're just
California transplants.
They're just trying to win games, man, and do what's necessary to win games.
I get that, but it's funny.
Generational Tennesseans are going to be fine with that.
That's laugh out loud funny to me.
I don't know. I think you're trying to connect something that just is not there.
I don't think that's true at all. I think that's exactly what's happening. I should have stopped at Silicon Valley, huh? That's where I had you.
Like that was a good enough metaphor. Good enough metaphor. But once you start tying it in with they're becoming what they hate, like, all right, now we're trying to.
I'm just having some fun with it, bud. 615-737-1045 is the number. Larry Arnold in the F&M Bank chat says Buck was venting his personal problems. No, I'm a big fan of the transplants. Keeps my property value going up. I am one. I'm the thing that you hate. I get it. I identify with it. I understand.
Well, here's what encapsulates that change of direction. In the press release, they talk about Callahan's resume, his accolades. They say, additionally, Cincinnati's offense under Callahan featured a trio of 1,000-yard wide receivers in Jamar Chase, who did it 3 years in a row from 21 to 23, T. Higgins, who did it 21 and 22, and Tyler Boyd, who did it in 2019. Buck, how many 1,000-yard wide receiver seasons have the Tennessee Titans had since the move to Nashville in the late 90s?
Oh, AJ's got 2.
Yeah, just give me a number. How many 1,000-yard seasons by a wide receiver?
In 25 seasons, I bet they have 15.
11.
God bless.
Derek Mason had 4 of those.
I know. It's so bad. And that was so long ago. He just turned 50, by the way. Looks great for 50.
He does.
Just turned 50. That is the greatest. The 50-year-old is the greatest wide receiver in the history of the Tennessee Titans, and nobody has threatened him really since, and they traded away AJ too soon before he could.
It's exactly what we're talking about.
Oh, my God.
In the last decade, how many 1,000-yard wide receivers have the Tennessee Titans had? From 2014 to now?
Just tell me.
4. That's what we're talking about.
And one of them's Hopkins.
Correct.
It just happened. Unbelievable. All the YouTube chat's guessing 3, 4, 5. It can't be double digits. Yeah, no, 11. That's still crazy to me. All right, let's get some phone calls. 615-737-1045 is the number. If you want to jump in, we'd be happy to have you. How about Dustin in Laverne?
Hey, what's up, guys? Hope you're doing well. Super excited about the new hire. See, he's done some pretty good stuff with the quarterbacks he's worked with. There's 3 things for me as a fan that I personally really want to see from all this. The first thing, most important, I think we can all agree, we have to fix the offensive line. We can't do that every game. Secondly, we need to address the wide receivers, whether we do that free agency or get a young one. And then third, most important to me, and I've been loving watching the Detroit Lions because of the way they're doing this year, but I want to incorporate the young people that we have that are valuable as much as we can. We have been doing a good job at it, but I think we can do more. I think Tajay should catch the ball 3 to 5 times a game. He's, electric with that. And then I like what they're doing with Laporta. I think we need to try to use Josh Wiley a little more. I know they're not the exact same style player, but you don't need analytics to know that when you got a guy that's 6 inches taller than most of the people, throw him the ball when you're in the red zone. So that's what I got, guys. Hopefully have a good season.
Thanks for the call. Well, you don't have to worry. He said, hopefully we have a good season. It's January, brother. It's going to be okay. We're going to get you there. Now, a lot of those comments, obviously we've talked about the offensive line stuff. Now that Callahan is officially announced, we'll talk about the advantages later in the show that they get. Lucas, they're the only one that's made a hire.
Isn't that crazy?
It is crazy to me.
Senior Bowls starts in what?
They are going to leave for the Senior Bowl on Sunday. They will get to Mobile on Sunday to set up for a week-long scouting, evaluation, talking to agents, pre-free agency discussions and stuff like that. Like all of the off-season stuff starts next week in Mobile. More of your phone calls coming up next. We got some SEC observations. Don't forget, 11 o'clock, the dumbest thing in sports this week. We've got some fun ones. I'm Buck Rising. It's 104.5 The Zone. So wait, you're backing out while we're coming into this segment? I teased your SEC observations. You know how mad you get when I take away your airtime.
No, hey, big week for the Vols. A lot of pickups. Pretty important day for the Tennessee Titans, and people want to talk about it.
Yeah, but one of your favorite things in the world is to cut me off with that dreadful song. I'm balancing two things. I'm trying to keep the audience happy. I'm trying to keep you engaged.
Right, well,
They're very difficult.
That's the difference between you and me, Buck. It's not about my favorite things and what I want. It's about the people.
Well, the fact that you're doing the people thing makes you have a little bit of a God complex that I don't think you realize. The people. We are the people.
Yes,
right?
I'm the one on the show with the God complex.
Well, yeah, but I've been empowered to have the God complex. There's difference there. 615-737-1045. Now people just want you to play the song anyway. No, we're going to get the phone calls because obviously there's a lot to talk about in the world of the Titans. You're going to hear more from Brian Callahan on a new approach or a different approach. Not a new approach to the NFL, but one the Titans are trying to catch up to later on in the show. Meanwhile, let's go to Robert in Nashville. Hey, Robert.
Hey, Buck. How are you, buddy?
Good.
Hey, I just wanted to bring up a couple of points. As a professionally amateur GM, 8 out of the 32 first-round picks are going to be busts. That's, 75% is what the NFL says. And, people fall in love with physical attributes and like Traylon Burks, oh, he kills hogs with a knife. He's got to be the toughest. Man, I don't want no guy like that. I want a guy that sneaks over a fence just to watch a football game. The most important thing is love of the game. The Titans, what do they have, like 3 or 4 in a row that didn't work out because they fall in love with these stupid things, man. Love of the game is everything. It's kind of like when you're looking at your girlfriend all pretty and she's got a booger in her nose. I mean, am I willing to say something about that booger to her?
Robert, I just had this problem on the show. We just did this with Lindsay Rowley of Bally Sports. She had lettuce in her teeth. I didn't tell her on air, and she killed me for it afterwards. Killed me.
Yeah, you gotta be willing to say, hey, babe, get that booger out of your nose. But so it's so important. Love of the game trumps everything almost. I mean, you can't be a big fat guy, out of shape, and I love the game and, make an NFL team. You got to have some football stuff, but love of the game is the most important thing. That's my experience as a 50-year NFL fan. But, man, I love y'all, so have a great one.
Thank you for the call, Robert. That, of course, is future Tennessee Titans OC, Robert in Nashville, who called us yesterday, I believe. Always insightful. I should have told Lindsay. I still feel bad about the lettuce. Would you do that if Megan had something? But you and Megan have been together for so long. Like, that's different.
Going on 7 years.
Yeah. How often do you point out things like each other's boogers and stuff in your teeth like that? That is my least favorite stuff.
With the Lindsay thing, like, I think you probably should have said something during the break.
That we had a whole commercial break between it. That was where
You had every right to be upset.
That's fair. I understand that. All right. Ryan in Lebanon's next.
Hey, Buck. How you doing, man?
I'm good, buddy.
So earlier you said something about, people coming from California and everybody's mad about that. Well, who cares? If it wasn't for California, we wouldn't have Nico. If it wasn't for California, we wouldn't have people trying to get over here to get us a championship for the city of Nashville. That's what it's all about.
That's the right approach. That's the right attitude. Thank you, Ryan. Yes, the savior, Nico Iamaleava, California transplant, half the San Francisco 49ers organization, and a little bit of Bengals sprinkled in.
If it leads to wins, people will follow.
That was my point earlier, right? When I asked you, do they care as much about, and this is not a huge level of like intricacy, what we're talking about here, just who makes the decisions. So on that kind of surface level type of stuff, yes, you are correct. Fans care. But I think ultimately, like, they don't care how you get there at this point. They're tired of losing games. They're tired of seeing their team go on the road and getting their butts kicked. on a regular basis. I'm tired of talking to sad boy athletes after they can't win a road game but one at any point in 14 months of playing football or having football practices and things like that. They're trying to just pull themselves out of this thing. Do you want to do any SEC observations here, or do you want me to keep going with phones?
Just quickly, huge week for the Tennessee Vols. Obviously, the commitment of George McIntyre, the 5-star QB out of Brentwood Academy. He was on the morning show earlier today at 7:20. You can catch that podcast. It's already up on YouTube as well. The 2 transfer portal additions, Jackson Moy, the defensive lineman from Stanford, beefs up depth on that defensive line for Rodney Gardner, and Lance Hurd, the offensive tackle from LSU, fills a massive need. We've talked about the impact that Hurd can have. He at one point was the highest rated prospect in his class at LSU, 5-star coming out of high school. Huge get there. Leaves LSU because he just wasn't going to play a lot this coming year. They've got a couple of All-American tackles down there in Baton Rouge.
It's a huge weekend for Tennessee.
Huge weekend. And then last night, SEC basketball, Kentucky gets dusted at South Carolina, and a potential top 10 matchup is fast approaching in about 10 days when Tennessee goes up to Rupp Arena.
And we all know that the world is a better place when Kentucky basketball loses. We can all agree upon that, transplant or not.
Yes.
All right. Jason in Murfreesboro.
Hey, guys.
Hey.
Y'all talking about this new era, for the Titans. They're going to be hot, new, and fresh. So let's finally give the fans what they want, and let's bring out these red, flame-hot jerseys, man. Let's do it. Come on, talk to Amy. Let's go.
Do you like the red jerseys when you see them at the games? Like, people have to special order these things, right?
Yeah, I think they're fine. I don't know. I never have strong opinions on jerseys and uniforms. I mean, I don't
you
even
don't
know.
have a single opinion about the uniforms that they wear on a regular basis, other than the Oilers ones.
Love the Oilers.
Sure.
But I don't know, man. I can't match like what color shirt goes with what color pants. I don't know. Nobody should be listening to me about these things.
I don't know. I don't like the red look. It's not for me. I think the accents are great. I think the sleeves that like Jeff wears or that Derek or the red cleats, stuff like that. I think red is an accent, but the red jersey, it just looks, I don't know, it's too much for me.
They've never worn it.
It's not a thing. Like, what is the context? It's just kind of like doing like every college now has a blackout uniform, right?
Not every college. Like Alabama will never have one, right?
Sure.
Penn State,
Notre Dame.
Right, but Notre Dame will mess around with some alternate uniforms.
They'll get crazy.
They'll get crazy with the green and the gold, and they'll change up the helmets.
They're closer to Oregon than they want to admit.
I know. I agree with that. I totally agree with that. They would probably be so offended to hear you say that. But I agree.
know. As a lifelong Notre Dame fan, I'm offended saying it.
But no, I am perfectly fine with the Titans' alternate being the Oilers.
Yeah, it's fine.
Don't need anything more. It doesn't get better than that.
You just got the best thing. Now you want a crappy like secondary? I don't know. It just reminds me of something that you'd buy off one of those discount shelves, like the knockoff jerseys, like the iron-on stuff. Yeah, no, I'm good on the red jerseys. Luke in Nashville, last call before we get to the dumbest thing in sports this week. Hey, Luke.
First of all, sad boy athletes was one of the funniest things I've heard in a long time. So I don't care what business it is. It could be a car wash or a restaurant or whatever. There's got to be business structure. So everybody's laying the blame to Vrabel's feet right now and said, we didn't have any structure. Well, you know what? Whose job was it to draft these guys that we got and how bad they've been? Whose job was it to block the defenders from last year? Whose job was it to take care of the soft tissue issues that the teams have for the past 3 years and not being able to stay healthy? So there's a lot of blame being put at Vrabel's feet, but you know what? He was handed a car with a donut to drive and everything. So that's my opinion, and I hope Bill Callahan does a great job. But you know what? If they don't have any structure like that, they never had any.
Well, thank you for the call, Luke. I think it cut off. Did you cut him off, or did he cut off?
No, the line just kind of cut off. The Bill Callahan thing is going to happen a lot. Luke just said Bill Callahan, meaning Brian. That's prepare yourself for that.
Is it going to happen a lot if it doesn't actually happen? Did you see that in SI yesterday
about Bill Callahan?
How fiercely the Browns are prepared to protect their right to employ Bill Callahan.
He's a great offensive line coach.
Indeed. Well, we'll talk about the semantics of that later. Dumbest thing in sports this week. What was the dumbest thing in sports this week? Simple as that. You can call us. We can talk about it. We'll do ours next.
Life is busy. We could all use some extra time in our day, which is exactly why Two Rivers Ford offers mobile service. We'll bring the service to your driveway at no additional charge. Oil changes, brakes, batteries, the certified technicians at Two Rivers will perform basic maintenance on your vehicle wherever you are, so you'll have more time for moments like this. Schedule your mobile service appointment by scanning the QR code or calling Two Rivers Ford today.
It is 11:01. Good morning. I'm Lucas Panzica from the 104.5 The Zone Studios. It is official. The Tennessee Titans have announced Brian Callahan as the 20th head coach in franchise history. Controlling owner Amy Adams Strunk's statement included the following, quote, "If you look at his history, Brian has been a part of a Super Bowl winning team and another team that advanced to the Super Bowl. He has worked in a variety of dynamic offenses with top flight quarterbacks. At each step of his career, he has shown the flexibility and intelligence to make an impact," end quote. In addition, the Titans finalized the team's front office football structure, promoting Rand Carthon to executive vice president and general manager, and Chad Brinker named president of football operations. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Hour number 2. Thanks for hanging out with Lucas Panzica and myself. We're happy to have you here. Titans make it official. Brian Callahan announced this morning all kinds of promotions up and down the front office. Rand Carthon, come on down. It's your show, bud. Chad Brinker, his former assistant general manager, now promoted as well to be head of football operations, the president of football operations. Rand Carthon now in full control of the football side of things for the Tennessee Titans. Dumbest thing in sports this week, 615-737-1045. You tell us, do we have anything to give people? What are we doing? Are we doing the Feed Your Flock? What are we doing? Anything? Am I just gaslighting people?
Yeah,
entirely?
you are.
Okay. Sometimes you tell me these things while the music's playing. I don't know. You want to play it?
Let's be honest. You've already seen something this week that made you say,
"What the is this?"
That's bullshit.
What the hell? Give me some warning.
something so mind-numbingly idiotic that you just want to get it off your chest.
Dumber than a second coat of paint.
Some idiot. You are really dumb. For real.
It's the dumbest thing in sports this week on the Buck Rising Show.
Sure is. It is presented by the Good Feet Stores of Nashville, now open in Clarksville. Locations all over Middle Tennessee. If you're dealing with foot, back, or hip pain, check out the Good Feet Stores of Nashville. They'll get you right today. Dumbest thing in sports this week is the Bills offensive tackle who was chirping at Patrick Mahomes, saying that he had not seen anything like Highmark Stadium in full effect, right? Never played in a stadium like Highmark, never been in an atmosphere like Highmark on the road, certainly not in the postseason. He's right. Patrick Mahomes had never played in a road game in the playoffs. Pat was being pelted, as were Chiefs fans, with snowballs and things like that from the Bills fans who had just shoveled all of it. And Pat Mahomes has the last laugh because he chirps back at the Bills offensive tackle and says, never seen anything like it, huh? On to the AFC Championship game. My 6th in a row. The dumbest thing in sports this week is anybody at any point doubting that quarterback because he is our generation's Tom Brady, and we should all fear him.
The dumbest thing in sports this week, for me, is, in hindsight, to be fair, all of the bemoaning and complaining and talk about the Titans not giving us their vision right out the gates when they fired Mike Vrabel.
This again feels personal.
Because I'm looking at it. I'm looking at the vision right here in an email, in a press release that was sent out to us, that was posted on social media, on the Titans website, a lengthy press release laying out their vision and structure for the front office, why the hire of Brian Callahan was made, the intention behind that move. So the dumbest thing in sports this week, to me, is everybody's inability to keep our powder dry when all we had to do was wait 14 days.
2 weeks a long time.
Sure.
2 weeks a long. All you have to do is wait 14 days. That's. I was willing to go along with your argument until you said to me, all you had to do is wait 2 weeks. Could have been done better in the press conference, Lucas.
Sure.
Okay.
And we didn't get any answers in that press conference.
No, we didn't.
That's fair.
Okay. That was my point.
But, and look, there were things about that presser, like my dumbest thing in sports this week, the day after that presser, was the explanation of ball not bouncing our way, right? Losing one-score games as a reason for the Titans' lack of success.
Saying that they didn't think they failed.
Right.
What?
Citing injuries, as part of the offensive line and not the personnel.
Sound like you're coming around on this.
It was flawed. But the vision thing, I did not think from the get-go that the Titans owed us a detailed explanation. Would I have liked to hear one? As a fan and a member of the media? Yes, of course I would have. But months from now, when the Titans roll out the Brian Callahan era on the field, are we really going to be going back and talking about those 14 days that we didn't know what the Titans' vision was? When it's sitting here right in front of us, loud and clear, and there's no questions about it now. We made a pretty big stink about that. And in hindsight, to me, that is the dumbest thing in sports this week.
No, local media, absolutely, including myself, absolutely. Well, I think it just spoke to a level of frustration about why waste everybody's time if we're not actually going to talk about anything beyond, hey, you can refer to the statement that Amy put out. That, I think, is what bothered the most amount of people. And that vision is the thing that got harped on. It just ends up like collaboration where we're getting tweets now. Apparently, Doc Rivers is going to replace the Milwaukee Bucks coach that was fired last night, and they are citing a collaborative approach in the Bucks hire of Doc Rivers. So it's just a buzzword, right? It's just something that people come back to and decide to harp on. These things happen. 615-737-1045 is how you tell us what the dumbest thing in sports this week is. Chase is in Charlotte up next.
What's up, guys? My dumbest thing in sports this week is the Las Vegas Raiders absolutely pumping the Chargers on national television in Week 15, and now going out and hiring Tom Telesco, the guy that assembled that Chargers roster, to be the next GM of the Raiders. Seems like it might not be the best look.
That is an interesting move. Thanks for the call, Chase. And I don't think Raiders fans are overwhelmingly happy about that. Did you see that Tom Telesco, the fired Chargers GM, is going to be in Las Vegas now?
I did. So two teams have named their GM, right? The Panthers elevated Dan Morgan, the assistant GM of Scott Fitterer, and Telesco hired in Vegas.
Mm-hmm. So you could argue that few people would have as good a grasp on that division as somebody who was just working in that division. And the problem wasn't the roster in Los Angeles, right? It's the fact that Brandon Staley just kind of bleeped around and wasted it.
Yeah.
So I'm not that they fired both of them at the same time. I don't know.
They wanted a clean slate.
We talked about it here with Amy. Maybe Amy did the wrong thing by not having a clean slate, firing John when she did, and then letting go of Vrabel at the end of the season. So sometimes that's in the best interest of ownership. These owners talk, by the way, like how they handle their respective coaching hirings and firings. What kind of vibe is in their building? Hey, did you hire a couple of Patriots guys? Oh, hey, we have a couple of Patriots guys. It's not really working out great for us either. Maybe we need something new. These discussions happen.
If we're talking about a tough sell for GM hires across the league, to me, Dan Morgan being elevated in Carolina, it's a lot tougher to sell fans than hiring Tom Telesco, who built that roster in L.A.
Well, I think the Panthers are in a maybe not an enviable place if they don't have to sell their fans on anything because there's nothing to sell them. There is no hope. It doesn't matter who you make the GM. They have no first-round pick.
It is
bad.
It's a hopeless situation right now. And it doesn't mean it can't be fixed with the right hire and Bryce Young turning out to be the right quarterback, but it is hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel, I imagine, if you're a Panthers fan right about now.
It's like I questioned a couple of years ago the existence of Chargers fans, and then one popped out of the woodwork and called the radio show and was like chirping us before the Titans went out to L.A. that year, and the Chargers won the game. So
they did in front of nobody.
You were there. You also understand. I don't think they're real. It's like Slay's thing about birds not being real. I don't think Chargers fans are real.
They feel so insignificant in L.A.
I don't know.
They really do.
I don't know how many Panthers fans are actually out there. Panthers have at least been to a Super Bowl, I guess. Been to a couple.
But I think Panthers I think they have a decently sizable fan base. Okay. It's the South, man. People, do we call North Carolina the South? I think
yes.
So. Yeah, we do.
If you're going to call Virginia the South, then you got to call North Carolina and South Carolina the South. Joseph in Huntsville is next.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen it or not, but Bronny James jumping up and tapping the thing that he was tapping, and he hits his head and falls down. That's my dumbest thing in sports.
I'm sorry, Joseph. I didn't hear who you said.
Bronny James.
Oh, Bronny
is what I heard.
Oh, I heard Vernon. Well, I got to get my hearing checked.
I hadn't. I'm not sure.
I know KD was there to watch Bronny's game last night for USC. I did see that going around. I didn't see anything come out of Bronny.
Okay,
Bronny James's.
so USC. Oh, okay, I'm seeing it now. USC was playing at Arizona State, and Bronny James was jogging off the court to boos from ASU fans, and he jumped up to tap like one of the sponsorship signs before he went into the tunnel, and he like tapped it and banged his head on it as he's going into the tunnel.
That's incredible. Speaking of jogging off the court and getting hurt, did you see what happened to Caitlin Clark?
Yes, that was bad. That's the dumbest thing in sports this week.
I completely forgot about that until just now. So for those of you who didn't see it, I turned on NBC early before the playoff game started. I guess that would have been Sunday afternoon, and it's Iowa, who's the most electric college basketball team, men's or women's, in the country right now. Caitlin Clark is the biggest star in college basketball this season, and they are on the road against Ohio State, and Ohio State takes them to overtime. I can't remember the name of the girl for Ohio State that was going blow for blow with Caitlin Clark down late. Took them to overtime, and this was the lead-in for Football Night in America before, I think, Bucks-Lions was the game right after. And so Ohio State wins in overtime. It's one of the biggest upsets of the college basketball season.
Even though they're a top 12 team.
Yeah, but I mean, it's Iowa, and it's Caitlin Clark is I mean, who's a bigger star in college? How many stars are bigger in college sports than Caitlin Clark? Truly.
Yeah, right now, like, how many stars is Caitlin Clark making more NIL money than in college basketball?
Oh, not. I mean, there are not many people in that tax bracket.
Who's the biggest star on the men's side right now? Zach Edey? There's a lot of parity. I'll say that.
It's probably Edey and his big dumb face. But
okay, Indiana grad.
I can't.
Are you thinking of Cody McMahon as the girl that was?
Yes,
she put up 33.
She was awesome, man.
100-92.
It was crazy. I was dialed in. It got me so hyped for playoff football sitting on the couch. And I know, I'm sure people were watching it for gambling purposes or, some just watching women's college basketball. Caitlin Clark is a sold-out arena. People are lined up outside in the Midwest cold for hours to watch this woman play.
But
She's
the point,
awesome.
Point is, an Ohio State fan runs her over during the court storming. The F&M Bank chat is alleging she flopped.
Well, I'm alleging that the fan flopped. I think the fan flopped.
Okay.
Caitlin Clark she's 6 foot. She's full size. But are you seeing the run in right now? Are you watching it? Are you alleging that Caitlin Clark flopped?
No. I don't think so.
You're not brave enough to do that? You're scared of the Iowa fans? They'll come for you. They're very unhappy, just generally.
That's a big fan base.
It's a big fan base, bud. They'll let you beat up on their football team all you want. Don't you say anything bad about Caitlin Clark. Yeah, but that fan is dumb. Have some awareness. I know you're in the moment. I know court storming and all that. Like, I've been a part of court storming. Have you ever been a part of a situation like that?
In high school.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Not anything for Tennessee or?
No, the only time Tennessee has stormed a court or field in recent memory was Alabama, 2022.
But never. So in college, Indiana beat Anthony Davis and Kentucky at
buzzer beater, right?
At Assembly Hall.
Yeah, that was your banana game.
Yeah, that's the banana suit. So, like, I'm telling you, you have no idea what's going on, and people are definitely throwing shots at, like, who was it? Terrence Jones, throwing an elbow at Terrence Jones and stuff like that. And while you're trying to lift Victor Oladipo over your head and put him on your shoulders, and he's a giant, so you can't. All those different things. So I understand that there's a general lack of self-awareness in court storming and field storming, stuff like that, but you can't run into Caitlin Clark like that. Can't do it, even if it was a flop. All right. Titans, are they ahead of the game? Are they trying to catch up? Is Brian Callahan's approach going to help them? You're going to hear from the now announced Titans head coach coming up next. So Titans ahead of the curve on this head coaching hiring. They're the only club of the 8 that were turning over head coaches this year. They're the only one to hire a coach that wasn't internal. Brian Callahan's press conference, his introductory press conference tomorrow at 1. Going to scurry on down there after the radio show. Make sure I'm there for that. They'll carry it on Blaine and Mickey. Safe to assume I won't be on Blaine and Mickey tomorrow, given the timing of that, but I'm sure the boys are going to be okay with that. I'll work out the logistics with them later on. Maybe we'll do it later in their second hour. Either way. So, beneficial for a variety of different reasons that we're going to get into here in just a second. Your phone calls are welcome, 615-737-1045. What did you make of the news today? Obviously, you knew Callahan was going to be your coach. That made official, but Rand Carthon, his show, his team, his role as the executive vice president and general manager, basically they made him John Robinson. Now, I don't know, there was a bunch of things that ended up falling under John's purview at the end that were curious for a general manager, that I was always interested in how that final restructure went, where he's making decisions about what the team posts on social media and things of the like. But
I'd say it's less they made him John Robinson and more they made him an
actual GM.
Right.
No, but the vice president role is not inconsequential here, Lucas, because that was a promotion that John got too. So basically, they didn't have – that's the thing. Like, they tried to placate Vrabel and make this thing work last year with a structure that was incorrect, and it blew up in their face. Remember I brought up that San Francisco never hired anybody to replace Rand in his role? That they just folded those responsibilities in under Adam Peters, who was the assistant GM at the time. They never replaced Rand in San Francisco. They kind of didn't replace John fully after firing him. They put Mike and Carthon in this weird spot that it's easy for Mike to kind of run roughshod over, that it lends itself to who his personality is anyway, and they set themselves up for failure. So that vice president role, that executive vice president role, is not inconsequential here. You know what it reminds me of a little bit? When they made Bowen the defensive play caller, but not the defensive coordinator.
You're saying that the situation last year.
Yeah, this Carthon Vrabel thing
yes.
reminds me of what they did with Mike and Bowen, where Vrabel never replaced Dean Pease, or didn't replace Dean Pease.
There was not officially a defensive coordinator on the coaching staff by label.
And, of course, 2020 was a catastrophe for a great many reasons, much less a global pandemic altering all kinds of things during that season. But that ended up not being beneficial for them. And in 2021, you have Kevin Byard coming out and saying, yeah, we didn't know who was coordinating us. We could just do with a bit more coordination. Oh, funny, you don't have a DC. Now you do. Now you thrive. They were much better in 21 than they were in 20. And so it kind of reminds me, you would think that they would learn from their mistakes, given that was a mistake that was made in-house, but maybe they didn't see it until it hit them in the face. And so now they're ahead of the curve with Callahan. They beat everybody else to the punch. Would you have had Brian Callahan as the first coach to be hired? Just flatly, where we've talked so much about Ben Johnson, where there's, Antonio Pierce, I guess, technically, and then Gerard Mayo, technically.
Yeah, internal candidates.
But of the external guys who were interviewing for teams' jobs, I don't know that I would have had Callahan number one.
Well, it makes sense that the Ben Johnson thing is being dragged out, right? He's the top candidate. He's got playoff games to prepare for. He's got an NFC championship game to coordinate on Sunday, and he knows he is the hottest commodity on the market. So it stands to reason that Ben Johnson isn't, taking that first offer, or a team isn't snapping him up right out the gates. Elsewhere, I am surprised that, you're seeing Jim Harbaugh. In fact, I just scrolled by it. Jordan Schultz of Bleacher Report stating that Harbaugh is going to talk to Atlanta. He's currently scheduled to interview today with Atlanta for a second time. Meanwhile, he has been in L.A. continuing to have serious discussions about the possibility of the Chargers, and Michigan continues to push to keep him as well. There's a lot of moving parts, and the Senior Bowl is in a few days. So it's just interesting that this thing is dragging out as much as it is for a lot of other teams, because weren't we sitting here talking about the Titans as in, hey, they got to you got to get this done this week.
Oh, sure. No, that's how you feel about all these teams.
And also in Carolina, just finished hiring their general manager, and now he's going to go get their new head coach. So every situation's a little bit different, but I am surprised that the Titans are the only one at this point to have hired an external candidate.
So now we've talked about, the idea of Thomas Brown potentially as an offensive coordinator, a name to watch here, and that's been a part of the discussion for a couple of days. He's obviously one of 3 people to even get a second interview scheduled here, and Dan Quinn they obviously didn't get to on Wednesday. They had Brown and Callahan scheduled for follow-ups on Monday, and then ultimately the reporting came out on Monday that they had decided on Callahan. So with that, not knowing, I haven't really seen, I've seen a lot of people talking about having worked with Brian Callahan. Former quarterbacks, you've seen quotes from Matt Stafford, Dan Orlovsky, who's on ESPN now, former Lions quarterback, talked about working with Callahan during his time there. Everybody glowing about the level of insight, the level of feedback that he's open to from players. The idea, Dave Lapham described it as democracy as opposed to dictatorship.
That's a two-way street.
Seems to be a common theme everywhere he's been. But coaches that he's connected to, I haven't seen a ton of people drawing connections or reporting about Titans bringing in, like Chris Harris, the Titans cornerbacks coach. He's interviewing for DC jobs all over the place. Haven't seen anything, even as we've known Callahan for a couple of days now, linking anybody from Bengals staff to him right now. The only thing that you've really seen with any level of credibility around it is Brown and his dad, Bill.
Yeah. And Brown, because the Titans interviewed him, is that your biggest basis for continuing to bring up that name as an OC?
Well, no, they like him. And there is a thought there that he can be a good supplemental offensive coordinator in the same vein as Callahan was for Zach Taylor.
What other current assistants would it make the most sense for Callahan to consider keeping?
Charles London.
QB coach.
Pass game coordinator.
Just from a continuity standpoint?
If you like the work that he was doing with Levis, and again, Callahan, as a part of this, I don't know if he's doing this today. I don't know if he's doing this after his press conference. At some point, he's going to talk to the coaches who are still under contract here. So we will ask him whether he has interviewed these people or not. Remember, Rand mentioned that he had already taken time to go talk to each one of the assistant coaches before meeting with us after they made the decision to move on from Mike, because they fired Mike at like 11 o'clock, and then, we had the press conference at 4. Carthon's day was spent dealing with the assistant coaches and kind of making sure they were ready for whatever the next couple of weeks were going to look like. So whether Callahan's done that yet or not, if I'm Charles London, I'm putting together a pitch on why everything that I've done with Will Levis is something that I need to keep building on. It's a pretty good spot. And if you Art Smith it, for example, do you remember Vrabel talking about how Art kind of put himself in the running for the job? Just walked down the hallway, was like, hey, Mike, don't know if you're thinking about this. Don't know if we've talked about it before, but I would like to submit myself as an in-house candidate to be the offensive coordinator. And obviously there was a whole process, and Mike ended up going with Art. It was a very beneficial relationship. It takes somebody showing that initiative as a coach to your current or future boss or potential boss. Hey, no, I have a plan here. Here's my plan. And all these coaches should and will have these things prepared for whatever conversations with Callahan and Carthon, or Callahan separately, whatever that looks like. They should all have a compelling pitch if their plan is to stay here. And I think Charles London is somebody who they would benefit from keeping.
Part of Amy's statement read, quote, as our league continues to evolve in areas like analytics, sports science, and technology, football organizations have become more complex and multifaceted. Do you take that piece, sports science, as anything to do with strength and conditioning?
Hell yes.
Do we probably expect a complete overhaul of that part of the franchise?
I don't know if I mentioned this yesterday on the radio or if I did it on primetime, but one of the biggest questions that I want to ask at this press conference tomorrow is, what are you going to do moving forward? they're not going to comment on stuff that they've done in the past, right? It's just going to end up sounding like, no, me and Mike were in lockstep, yada, yada. Everything was copacetic. It's all fine. Look away. Everything's fine while the room's on fire. But to ask them what their plan is moving forward, I think can potentially lend some of these insights to what it is that to what maybe they're not going to tell you the differences between what was being done in the past and what they're going to do now, but to shed some light on how they're going to do things in a different way, because I think their plan is to do things in a different way. I don't expect you're going to see Mike Vrabel's strength and conditioning coach, Frank Perrano, that he hired from Boston College. I don't think you're going to see him here. All right. Burke Nihill, he was on the morning show, Ramon, Kayla, and Will, Titans CEO and team president. He spoke about Callahan and kind of where he fits in all of this and how they're going to use that image moving forward.
Yeah, Brian Callahan is the template, just plain and simple. We started off going into this search trying to be disciplined about creating a profile. You know, before you start putting names to it, before you start doing the research on experience, what specifically were we looking for? And it was character traits, it was experience sets, it was league reputation, league network, and from the beginning, Brian Callahan, from the research, was at the top of that list. And as the interview process played out, I think we interviewed 9 people and a ton of impressive candidates in that mix. But from the very beginning, Brian started with a lead and ended with a lead. He just was exactly what we were looking for to partner with Rand Carthon to build a consistent championship contender.
It kind of outlines why it is that fit makes the most sense.
He kind of carries the torch into what they want to look like.
Sure, which is what the entire league is doing. I mean, the entire league for the most part. Who do we consider kind of stuck in their ways organizationally? When you look at the way that teams go about their approach, offense is the thing that people harp on the most, understandably so. It's no longer a defense win championships league. It hasn't felt like that for some time. You need competent defense. You need average defense. You need stops. You need turnovers. You need pressure from time to time, but it's not, you don't have to live and die with it the way that this team felt like it was doing.
Patriots are coming to mind when you say that.
Well, and they haven't changed. They have changed something. They have changed something very big. But if the guy is being described as Belichick's son, but without being his actual son, Gerard Mayo.
Yeah, which is Steve.
His son's on staff.
Who actually...
That's the funniest part of all that. That everybody refers to Gerard Mayo as Belichick's son, and Steve Belichick is looking around being like, hey, man, what the bleep?
To be fair, that clip with Brady and Rodney Harrison was years ago, that when they're joking about, calling him Gerard Belichick. I don't know how old Steve was when that clip came out.
Steve's been there for a little while.
He has.
Steve's been there making weird faces, doing weird tongue motions on the sidelines, right, when he slumped over calling the defense. Like,
is he a defensive coordinator candidate around the league?
He's one in New England. That's what I'm saying. Like that's kind of that's a good example, because Seattle felt like, or at least it looks like, based on the change that Seattle made with Pete Carroll, organizationally they're feeling a little bit of that too. 9-8 again. It's a winning record. They didn't make the playoffs, but they're kind of looking at Pete Carroll and saying, all right, have we maxed? Has Pete maxed out here? Because we think our roster's better. Seattle and the Titans are kind of, Seattle's more successful in the last couple of years than Tennessee is, but they're kind of good mirror images of one another, which is why I honestly would be surprised to see them hire Mike Vrabel. But he seems to be a person that a lot of people are connecting to that job as we sit here waiting for anybody else to make a move. Chargers, Falcons, Commanders, Seahawks, these jobs that are still open and out there.
Teams stuck in their ways. Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. Sounds like a law firm.
Oh, that's one person?
On the F&M Bank chat.
Yes,
that's
I
one
thought you
username.
were reading a collection of people that were agreeing with one another.
He says New Orleans.
Oh, yeah, but New Orleans is physically, they're in Chapter 11. they're filing for bankruptcy and trying to bail out parts and pieces, but not really, because they kept I guess Dennis Allen doesn't fix their cap situation. Have you ever seen a Mickey Loomis press conference? Their GM there?
No.
That is one of the most, you think Vrabel drives people crazy with a level of kind of self-assuredness and, my way or the highway type stuff? Holier than thou, Mickey Loomis, the GM of the Saints, who's basically almost a member of ownership around there. He's been there so long. To listen to him talk about why they were retaining Dennis Allen, it would make me insane if I was a Saints fan. Insane.
How about this quote from about a week ago? Mickey Loomis on keeping head coach Dennis Allen. Chuck Noll, his first 3 years, 1-13, 5-9, 6-8. They recognized he's a good football coach. Bill Belichick, his first 3 years, 6-10, 7-9, 7-9. Tom Landry, 0-11, 4-9, 5-8, 4-10, 5-8. All of them Hall of Fame coaches. The easy thing is to blame them. You got to look beyond that.
Dennis Allen.
Got to make Saints fans feel good about their coach who's got a 20-44 record as a head coach.
That's what I'm saying,
that.
Lucas. I would scream if I was a Saints fan. I can't imagine how your buddy Jay's doing.
Not well. They did fire Pete Carmichael, who the longtime offensive coordinator.
But still, it's kind of like trading Kevin Byard and keeping the rest of it intact. It's just kind of like, are you halfway doing it? Pittsburgh is another interesting nominee there because Tomlin is getting an extension, to hear the owner of the Steelers tell it. And he's, confidently telling the team in press conferences, I mean, they've not made a change there. Mike Tomlin's not going anywhere. I don't know how Steelers fans feel about that, but they also feel like, and one quarterback fixes that. If they can get better than average quarterback play again, if it's not Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett out there dinking and dunking around, throwing passes behind the line of scrimmage and stuff like that.
And the offensive coordinator hire.
Well,
hugely important up there.
Very. But that style of football, that philosophical kind of, okay, are you just treading water? Are you winning more than you're losing? Amy said that in her statement, right? Our objective is not just to win more games than we lose. Pittsburgh kind of feels like it's in a similar spot, even as Tomlin is one of the best coaches, full stop, in the league. You don't have that level of success for that sustained period of time across different generations of football and not be above average at your craft. Nobody's going to dispute that Mike Tomlin's a good coach.
Well, let me ask you this. Who had the better offense this season, the Cowboys or the Steelers?
The Cowboys.
Who did a better coaching job this season, Mike McCarthy or Mike Tomlin?
The Steelers. Yeah, but McCarthy. Did you see Kevin Clark, by the way, is going to be on with us on Friday. He's got, he said, quote, I have a ton on Brian Callahan. So this is somebody who's been very, very available to national media, especially since Cincinnati and Burrow have been in the spotlight. Everybody involved around the development and improvement of Joe Burrow has been interviewed many, many times. Apparently, Brian Callahan is one of the best quotes that you can get, and Kevin Clark is going to expand on why Titans fans should be excited with this hire on Friday with us. But basically, he was saying of Mike McCarthy, there's not a more pre-fired individual in 2024 than Mike McCarthy. That's your guy. Jerry's going to let him play out his contract. Anyway, phone call 615-737-1045 is how you jump in. You can interact in the chat if you want. Analytics and where they factor in for the future of this Titans football team, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. You're going to hear from your new head coach coming up next. Welcome back to the show on this Wednesday. Get to your phone calls here in just a little bit. Analytics is a word. Do you feel like people are past the point where they get kind of put off by the term? In football, it feels like we were a little later to the game, right? Baseball has been picked apart numbers-wise to death. So much so where if you're not a baseball fan or not a diehard baseball fan and you're looking at some of the advanced metrics that they use to determine a level of a player's skill or aptitude or stuff like that, the Moneyball approach, it can be a little intimidating. If it's just a bunch of terminology that you don't understand to define a bunch of numbers that you get kind of, but maybe misplace a time or two. We hate math. I think as a society we can agree. We as a show certainly hate math. But the word analytics is no longer something that it sounds like people fear. It sounds like we're more in a mode where we embrace it as a football-consuming society. I think we've made that shift. So to hear the new Titans head coach, Brian Callahan, kind of get into a little bit of his position on it in a previous interview with whom, Lucas?
This was part of that presser he did before training camp last summer. It's the same presser where we've played the audio about the evolution of offense in the NFL and the importance of the passing game.
This is Brian Callahan's position on analytics in football.
The general ones that I do think have real value and do paint a picture offensively, the EPA, the expected points, and EPA percentage, those things generally tell you if you're a good offense. I mean, you look at those numbers and they bear out that if you're leading in that category, you're probably pretty good on offense. There's a couple other ones that are a little bit telling. The DVOA is also another one that can paint a picture of your offensive efficiency, but the kings are always going to be the situational, the third down, the red zone. Are you converting third downs? Are you scoring points in the red zone? Those are always going to be the teams that are good in those areas are generally going to be the top 5 offenses in football.
How much have you had to familiarize yourself with some of these calculations about these figures?
Quite a bit. I mean, it's been a gradual increase for us. We've been following some of those things a little bit longer than like the mainstream popularity of some of them. They've been part of football for a while, but yeah, I mean, you try to understand it because there's a lot of numbers out there, and some are more valuable than others, and you try to do your best to find the ones that matter, and then find out how you can improve those numbers and what that looks like. And sometimes it's just how the season unfolds. But there's a lot of information out there, and our job is to try to filter it to what's most important and how do we improve in the areas that we have to improve in to get better.
Did you hear how that reporter asked that question? Did you have to take so much time to familiarize yourself with these calculations like you've just presented him with a trig class or something like that? It's a level of catch-up that media has to do. Like do you ever pay attention to this stuff, like the difference between Greg Olsen and I'll just use Troy Aikman as an example, and how Olsen weaves a lot of that stuff, EPA per play, and those kind of metrics and things like that you hear people discussing and using more mainstream in their football discourse, but he'll do it in the booth, and he'll do it in a way that helps you feel like you're understanding. Whereas Aikman is old school and, commenting on some things about the level of physicality in the game and using stuff like, well, why don't they just tell them to take the skirts off and stuff like that, right? There's two differences in the approach there. But I think, do you feel like you benefit from hearing people talk about advanced analytics in football? Or are you somebody whose eyes glaze over when you start to dip into the nitty-gritty?
That one.
We lose you when we talk numbers.
It doesn't mean they're not important.
DVOA doesn't mean anything to you. It's like your position on everything else societally. World's just happening
around me. I know it means something and it's important, but there are people that are smarter and above my pay grade that understand it better than I do.
But Lucas, you're speaking for the vast majority of people, because I'm sitting here thinking, this is a coach that understands this stuff. This is a coach that has been using these kind of metrics as a part of their evaluation process. This is going to change how I ask questions. Should it change how we talk about it on the radio show? Is hearing this in a press conference from somebody who is very, very much not Mike Vrabel, how is the audience going to receive that? Are their eyes going to glaze over in one ear, out the other, and just say, okay, great points? DVOA. What? Points? Yes, points. That. I like that. Points. Do we have a good DVOA? What is DVOA? Can I get it for Christmas? Do you buy it in free agency? What is this DVOA? 615-737-1045 is the number. It's like we're doing Bitcoin football. I love that. Randy in Missouri.
Hey, Buck, how y'all doing?
Good.
I just had a quick question, comment about bringing Bill Callahan. I know I seen on Twitter where PK had said that using the assistant upgrade or promotion is being like frowned upon from the league. What would be the pros and cons of possibly moving Bill Callahan over as a straight offensive coordinator? I mean, who better to have that line of communication with than your own dad to purvey your message to the offense? And I'll listen on the other side. Thanks.
Thank you for the call, Randy. I haven't heard anybody talking about Callahan as an offensive coordinator, just as an O-line coach. And again, that does not circumvent your problem of the Browns have to, he's under contract.
In Cleveland, yes.
In Cleveland.
The last time Bill Callahan was an offensive coordinator was for Dallas, 2012 to 2014. He was the offensive coordinator and offensive line coach.
And people didn't love that experiment, from what I recall.
Was that under Jason Garrett?
That would have been, yeah.
Did he call plays in Dallas?
There might have been a time because they turned over OCs pretty frequently down there. I mean, Jason Garrett was in that job for so long. You ever think about that? Just how much of a leash Jason Garrett got as the Cowboys coach? And I know there were, plenty of reported on reasons about how he kept himself alive in that job. But that doesn't help you hire him if you just said, well, what if we make him an offensive coordinator instead of a O-line coach? So he brought up something that Paul Kaharski had mentioned, which is that there is a workaround for coaches under contract if you are promoting them to an assistant head coach. Now, the league can make that more difficult on you and say, come on, what are we doing here? Because not only does it circumvent a lot of the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you can snort at that if you want to, but those processes are important and are in place for a reason. And two, especially not if it's like a father-son dynamic, right? Like that's exactly what they're trying to prevent against. In fact, I think one of the things that kind of wore down Dean Pease's time here is Dean Pease brought his son on board with him as a defensive assistant. I don't know if you remember Matt Pease. He had been a high school coach prior to that, and he was on Vrabel's first staff. He was here while Dean was here. They didn't necessarily love that dynamic being so promoted as it was, right? That we've got this father-son duo here, even as it's wholesome, even as it meant a lot to Dean, especially at his age. Dean Pease, an older gentleman at this point in his life.
Sure, this is different. This is
different.
One of the best offensive line coaches in the country.
But, Lucas, it's not from the standpoint of, no. These are the rules that we get sued over. This is not, we're not jacking around with this just so you can coach with your son.
Did you know Zach Taylor, obviously Brian Callahan's former boss, played his college football under Bill Callahan?
Oh, really?
Yeah. Zach Taylor was the Big 12 Player of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, playing quarterback for Bill Callahan in Nebraska in 2006.
Full circle. Coming up next, what is Brian Callahan's runway? How much time are you giving this new Titans head coach to get the franchise up off the mat? We're talking about this before they have a full roster in place, before draft, before free agency. But you have expectations. I know you do. We'll talk about them next.
It is 12:02. Good afternoon. I'm Lucas Panzica from the 104.5 The Zone Studios. It is official. The Tennessee Titans have announced Brian Callahan as the 20th head coach in franchise history. Controlling owner Amy Adams Strunk's statement included the following, quote, "If you look at his history, Brian has been part of a Super Bowl winning team and another team that advanced to the Super Bowl. He's worked in a variety of dynamic offenses with top flight quarterbacks. At each step of his career, he has shown the flexibility and intelligence to make an impact," end quote. Brian Callahan will have his first press conference as the Titans head coach tomorrow afternoon at 1 p.m. In addition, the Titans finalized the team's front office football structure today, promoting Rand Carthon to executive vice president and general manager, and Chad Brinker named president of football operations. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Final hour on this Wednesday. Show's moving fast. We're happy to have you. Lucas is back there making it happen. 615-737-1045 is how you join the discussion. You can live stream the show if you want to. Hang out with us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. Wave hi at the camera, Lucas. Hi to the people on the live stream. Yes, you can live stream there. For those of you who are just listening on audio, we look like dopes, but that's okay. You have access to us looking like dopes on a regular basis. Brian Callahan is going to be the 20th head coach in the Titans-Oilers franchise history. He's replacing a person who was good enough to win more games than he lost, had good seasons here in Tennessee, had one great one, raised the level of expectation that I think fans and the ownership have of what this franchise could be in the larger landscape of the Titans. So what does that mean for the level of pressure that Brian Callahan is walking into? They have been bad enough for long enough now that I think the bar is going to be pretty low right out of the gate, right? People are going to expect them. People know what they're up against. You understand that you have draft picks. You understand that you have cap space. You understand, though, that your divisional rivals are just as well armed in Houston and Indianapolis, and then Jacksonville, while they blew it down the stretch and collapsed in ways that really are only equal to the 2022 Titans that I can think of, they still have a little bit of an edge on you, right? Titans are still 4 out of 4 if we're starting things up today. For all the reasons that we talked about. Roster's still bad. A lot of decisions to be made on that front. We expect this team to look drastically different in 4 months post-draft and free agency than the team that just concluded 2023. So are you looking around and saying, well, it doesn't take that long in the modern-day NFL to jumpstart one of these things? In fact, Callahan is coming from a situation that they went from awful of what was Cincinnati and Burrow's rookie year, a 4-win team, a 5-win team, right around there. And Burrow obviously tore his ACL after they played the Titans. It was one of the bigger upsets, right? Titans had only lost a game to the Steelers at the time, went on the road to Cincinnati, could not get any pressure on Burrow, and a bunch of backup offensive linemen with Clowney, Vic Beasley, and Jonathan Joseph got cut immediately after that game. As a whole mess.
It was year 3 of Zach Taylor in Cincinnati before they broke through and obviously beat the Titans and went to the Super Bowl. They were 2-14 pre-Burrow, 4-11 Burrow's rookie year.
So Callahan has seen that. It's just happened twice in this division, right? Jags, what they did in 2022 to kind of vault themselves into a different level of competitiveness, right? From how the season started to how they finished and making the postseason, winning a playoff game. The Texans nailed a draft class, had enough there and a good enough coaching staff to propel them to the divisional round, right? They've got arguably the best rookie quarterback by the numbers that any of us have seen in the NFL. And some pieces in place, like I said, Derek Stingley, a good corner, Laramie Tunsil, a top left tackle, a solid offensive line, a good run game. They got, hell, I mean, they replaced Dameon Pierce, who I thought was going to be their guy moving forward. Devin Singletary basically turned into their feature back.
Did not run. He had a nice season individually, but as a team, the Texans did not run the ball well last season.
But they took that leap, right? Because they nailed the draft class. They got Stroud. They got Will Anderson. They got Tank Dell. They got other pieces and parts to kind of where they could supplement it with a George Fan here. All right, we'll pay a little more than the Titans are willing to, more than the veteran minimum contract offer that you got, because we think that we've got something here that we can afford to spend a little more. We've got some cheap contracts. We'll make this happen. Is the expectation for Brian Callahan pre-free agency, pre-draft, that he's going to make this team infinitely more competitive than it was? Were the Titans uncompetitive in 2023? 6 wins is not bottoming out. It feels terrible, but it's not bottoming out.
You hate to bring up the one-score losses, but like uncompetitive in games? No, not necessarily. But big picture, as a contender, yes.
Sure, but I'm talking about, like, what is the runway for this man? Because all the signaling, again, from the ownership, is we're taking a step here. I'm assuming it's not taking a step back. I'm assuming that your level of patience, and 6 years is an eternity in coaching, college or pro, frankly. So Mike Vrabel getting a good run here, getting patience here, getting another opportunity to kind of rectify some of the stuff or go along with the new vision and then, blowing it in one way or the other. How much pressure does that ramp up on Callahan? I don't think I don't know how fans are viewing it, which is why I'm asking the question.
You don't get a year zero, right? Like we talk about with Butch Jones, year one is actually year zero. Like the way you give college football coaches runway to rebuild a roster in recruiting and patience paying off like it has with Mike Norvell at Florida State. You don't get a year zero if you're Brian Callahan, especially with all the resources you're going to have to address the roster in the next few months.
So is his expectation now playoffs, wild card? Am I being too harsh with that? If they're going to be more competitive in a division that is infinitely more competitive, this is the most competitive version, like equal playing field that the AFC South has been in, and I can't remember when. I mean, since McNair and Manning, right?
You're surrounded by playoff caliber teams. Yeah. With supposedly the future in at quarterback.
6 wins to 9 wins. At least make the graphic, Lucas. Is the expectation to make the graphic? Where am I putting the bar for Brian Callahan if he is here to further evolve and help take this franchise to a different level than the one that has previously been achieved here in year one? Mike Vrabel went to the AFC Championship game in year 2.
What you can't have is not sniffing the playoffs and not seeing steps forward in a significant way from Will Levis. Not seeing that quarterback resume coming into play in year 2 of Will Levis's career.
So in modern day football, and listen, we can't assume that everybody's cap situation is even, that everybody's draft capital situation is even, but let's say you're one of these bottom feeder teams, the way that the Titans are right now, heading into another year. We always talk about the number of playoff teams that flip year over year. How many teams that didn't make the postseason the year prior make the postseason the year following. The NFL always brags on that stuff when they put out their, as we get closer to postseason time, they put out their weekly press releases and stuff. Do you get, is the window for Brian Callahan 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? What is the appropriate timetable for him to achieve this goal? It took 3 years of depreciation from a roster standpoint to do in the Titans, right? They were living on borrowed time, and then in 2022, carrying into 2023, their situation was untenable. They didn't have the parts to fix it. Mike Vrabel's magic on piecing parts together and pulling out wins felt like it had run out, or the talent was such that you couldn't do anything with this collection of players. And also you had a situation where you weren't adapting enough as a staff relative to what the ownership thought you were capable of doing. Texans did it in a year. Are people now going to look at the Titans? Are Titans fans now looking at the Texans and being like, all right, your turn. Do it. I think some people are going to. I don't know how realistic that is. It seems not completely beyond the pale, I guess is my point.
The answers will vary based on the question, whether it's how quickly do you need to see Brian Callahan get this team back into playoff contention. Those answers, I think, will be all over the place from Titans fans. Some will say, no, it's got to happen right now. Like, no more patience in the NFL. It's got to happen by his second year, his third year. But the question of how quickly do you need to see progress from Will Levis with Brian Callahan being able to mold him, I think that answer will be pretty universally, almost immediately in his first season.
Somebody in the F&M Bank chat on YouTube says, stupid topic, been the coach officially for a few hours and already talking about when we fire him. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the expectation that your ownership just set. We will meet the moment is how she ended her statement firing Mike Vrabel. So now I'm supposed to couch those expectations? It's not a done topic at all. In fact, I think it is one of the most pressing questions. I don't know what her time frame is internally. I don't know if she's expressed that to Rand and to Brian. All I know is that what she had here was good, but not good enough. Good, but not great. To go back to one of those awful phrases that we went into one of the Titan seasons with under Mike Vrabel, right? Good to great. Well, good's not good enough. And I don't know how you're measuring greatness right now, or when your level of expectation, or when your level of meeting that expectation of greatness, when that officially starts. All we know is the clock has started on both of them as soon as that press conference happens at 1 o'clock tomorrow. That's why it's one of the most important. I mean, this is the most important decision the franchise has had to make in 10 years. It's huge. If they're actually on track to achieve the way that they think they're capable of achieving. Take your phone calls on this coming up next. We will also talk about Brian Callahan, the guy, versus Brian Callahan, the scheme. What are the Titans bringing in? A little of both. We'll talk about it next. Okay. Brian Callahan going to be introduced tomorrow. We're going to be at the press conference in some form or fashion. You're going to hear it right here on 104.5 The Zone. I assume that people will do interviews with Rand, with the coach. We'll work those details out for you, whether that's us, whether that's one of the 3 other shows, just based on time availability and stuff like that. I'm sure we'll talk to him at some point between Combine, between Senior Bowl. All that good stuff's coming up, so don't worry. You'll have all you can get of Rand Carthon and Brian Callahan over the course of the next couple of weeks. Before we get into guy or scheme, because I do think there's a difference, take your phone call, 615-737-1045 on who the Titans just hired. Scotty is in Castilian Springs.
Hey, guys. Yeah, I got you.
Yep.
I think it's a good coaching choice, but on time frame, I've been an Oilers fan since Pastor Rennie was there. But it has to be this year because Ray's this is his second year. And I think he dropped the ball in the first year because we should have had an offensive line. Now he's got to produce. He started all this. Now he needs to come on strong.
I appreciate the call.
Is that more about Rand?
Yeah. And listen, Levis, you've got 3 years to figure this out. You really don't have 3 years. You've really got 2 years.
If you think you have your quarterback in place, then you need to start seeing the results.
So let's make that the barometer. That's the cleanest way to do this, right? The time frame for Brian Callahan to figure this out is this coming season, 2024 and 2025. That is because Will Levis is on a second-round pick contract. There is no fifth-year option. You do not have runway on this. You've got this year and next year to figure out whether in year 4 that quarterback is worth paying. If you've got a system that works for quarterbacks who are not named Will Levis, if you are competing in the way that you expect to be, or if you've fallen short of those expectations and you need to reset the way that the Titans just had to do, phasing out of Tannehill and Henry, and we'll see what happens with Derek, but phasing out of that era of Titans football. So the runway for me is these next 2 years of Will Levis's contract. Of Will Levis's 4-year deal, you've already burned a year. That's the thing that makes the most sense, right? We talked about this yesterday. Brian Callahan, a big part of how he's judged by the fan base is going to be the success or the failure of Will Levis in his system. That's the trend that they are trying to capitalize on. They think that they have a quarterback at value. Amy has cited that as much. She has put a structure in place where they feel like they can take this step moving forward. So this year and next year, that's the time frame before we start to talk about, okay, is this working in the way that it needs to work? Vrabel bought himself more runway by missing the playoffs in year 1, having the win and in, right? They were in it until the end. And then Mariota, whether or not you use that as kind of an excuse for Mike Vrabel or an explanation for Mike Vrabel. Well, the quarterback situation was wonky all year long. Marcus got scratched day of against the Colts. They go out there and try and fend off Andrew Luck with Blaine Gabbert, and it doesn't work. Then they go into year 2, and you're in rarefied air. You're one of the final teams. You're a game away from the Super Bowl. And you have a 10-point lead, and then Patrick Mahomes does the scramble around Rashaan Evans, and he breaks you over his knee, and they go on to win the Super Bowl that year. And that's as close as you get. So Vrabel bought himself more time, and they had playoff appearances after that. They had the number 1 overall seed. He wins Coach of the Year. So 6 years is more than most coaches get in a situation like this, even in a market that's not as heavily scrutinized as Tennessee is.
Well, we've talked about this. Did Ryan Tannehill buy Vrabel more time?
Yes.
And there's no way to know the answer to this question.
Ryan Tannehill bought everybody more time. Everybody.
If that deal by John Robinson, basically getting the Dolphins to pay the Titans to take Tannehill, if that doesn't happen, does Mike Vrabel get the opportunity to go get his quarterback? Like, can we confidently say that?
No.
Okay, so if it plays out similarly with Levis, the hope is that it doesn't and that Callahan is able to mold Levis and take that leap. if that does play out with Levis, similarly to how it did with Mariota, who had a lot of early promise in his career, and the Titans don't have that option in-house the way they did with Tannehill, how much of a runway then does Callahan get to get his own guy?
It's as much he has to figure out the backup situation. He has to protect himself against that possibility. He has to Jake Browning something here.
Levis is so hugely important for Brian Callahan.
Mm-hmm.
And that obviously goes without saying.
In the F&M Bank chat on YouTube, Jay Burner says, Tanny, question mark, Henry and A.J. Brown and the offensive line carried the team for 4 years. You had all of those things and a different quarterback, and they didn't do bleep. They were 2-4. All that run left stuff, AJ and Corey Davis, you had one game in that stretch against Atlanta where you thought that it was real, that you thought Marcus might make it, right? That Atlanta game in Atlanta.
And the Cleveland game, right?
The opener was huge. The opener, they went crazy. But beyond that, that was really as much that was Cam Wake. Cam Wake had like 2 sacks in the season opener and then didn't do anything after that. It's like, oh my God, this 39-year-old, or I think he was 37 when he got the contract here, a 2-year deal.
That's going to be a great name years from now. You know, the
Titans
game of
legend.
Sitting around just naming random players that came through for the Titans. Remember Cameron Wake? Oh yeah,
he was
here.
But he was like, so they were at that point in 2019. Remember, where Cam Wake was a piece away, right? And Roger Saffold and Adam Humphries. These guys, okay, we've got young talent. Let's piecemeal the rest of it together, and we can afford to spend a little more on an aging pass rusher and an older guard and a slot receiver on a second contract. And those things worked out or didn't work out to varying degrees. Humphries and Wake not. Saffold did for about I'd say 2 seasons. But Tannehill is the thing that made the difference in all of that. Henry wasn't doing anything when Marcus Mariota was under center. Anyway, we don't need to revisit that. So the person that Ryan Tannehill, the person that Brian Callahan is, you've heard quite a bit about. You've heard how open he is, how willing to kind of explain his thought process, both as it relates to the leadership element of coaching and the game planning element of coaching, how they operate, what metrics they look at for barometers of success. You've heard a lot about who this person is and how that factors in to his offensive style. So who or what are they hiring Brian Callahan more for? The scheme or the approach? The answer is both, obviously. But if you had to weight it, what is the more important of those two qualities? The management style, given how the last head coach, I don't know, is flamed out the right word? Flamed out feels excessive. I don't know. Kind of shot himself in the foot, we'll say. Given how the Mike Vrabel experience ended and what they continue to cite as their new approach, their revamped vision, quote unquote, whatever you want to describe it as, is that the more important quality here, or is it the offensive system, because that's where the league is? And you can deal with a personality if they've got the scheme.
I think the offensive system is a part of that, though.
Sure.
Because of the way he's adapted with various different quarterbacks and what works for them and what they're comfortable with.
No, you like, if you are the Titans with these set of goals, we talked about this. He checks the most boxes across the board. But I'm just curious if there was one part of that was given more weight than the other, given what just happened here. Because, again, I haven't heard the Woodyard interview, so I don't know what he said about Mike Vrabel this morning. I heard it's not necessarily anything new, just kind of rehashing some of the older stuff about Wood's experience here as a player, and Vrabel as a polarizing figure. That's maybe some more details, but not new news. That and how it wore on coaches, whether you want to describe it as running coaches off, there have been examples of that. Tyrone McKenzie is somebody who comes to mind, the former linebackers coach here. I think Kerry Coombs got the opportunity to be a defensive coordinator at Ohio State, which was big for him, but I also think there was some grading there. Dean Pease, another example, So that's not inconsequential. And if it's hard to work for the guy and you got a reputation, then are you going with this mold of a coach because it's going to make you operate at a higher level and a more congenial level at all facets, plus the offense? Or is the offense the primary selling point? And hey, he's a real great guy. He's a real easy guy to work with. He's got a real diplomatic, democratic, collaborative, whatever approach. And we like that too, but offense, points, quarterbacks, touchdowns. What's the more important factor here?
Well, he's not a square peg, round hole guy, right?
Sure.
He's not a, no, you got to adjust to what we're doing type of coach. From everything that we've gleaned from former players and coaches, et cetera, works with the resources and that he has and figures out what they're comfortable with. So what do the resources he has in Tennessee dictate? And outside of Will Levis, it's a hard question to answer because that's what this whole offseason's about.
Yeah, this is what makes the discussion hard, is because the root of their issues is still the root of their issues until March. When does the new league year start? I think it's like March 12th, March 11th, something like that. That's when the contracts expire, and officially guys like Derrick Henry and Danico Autry and those dudes who are on expiring deals become free agents. Tannehill. And the market officially opens. Obviously, there will be negotiations prior to that, tampering, all these things.
Like, Rand Carthon is the GM now. There's no question about who's got final say in personnel and all of those things. But that doesn't mean Rand Carthon's not building a team that caters to Brian Callahan, right? Like, is that not Rand's job?
Sure, which he said as much.
Yes.
One of the few things to be gleaned actually out of the press conference is Rand saying, no, listen, even if they define our roles clearly, and everybody knows, as they've just done in a press conference, well, they will do in a press conference, in a statement, in a news release, in all of these things, in the announcement of the head coach, then I'm still going to find players that the coaches want to coach. We're not going to give the coaches players that they don't want to coach.
So what does a roster catered to Brian Callahan look like as far as how they build this thing this offseason? That's something
big,
we'll
fast, strong wide receivers and a quarterback that can rip it. And not even just the quarterback that can rip it part, right? How can you get the more refined version of Will Levis? Because I know what Will Levis can do as a talent. That's why the Josh Allen comparison is apt. I want to see him play quarterback better. And that is what you're trying to accomplish. You could say the same of Malik, even though those circumstances are different. I want to see them play quarterback better. I know what their physical gifts are. I know what sets them apart. I know what makes them so much fun to watch at combines and pro days and training camp practices when they're throwing 70-yard bombs on air. That stuff's great. But can you do them? And Mahomes is a tough comparison, but this is an example of a highly talented quarterback that was doing a lot of things based on his talents, and then as the years have progressed, have become much more a fit for the system that Andy Reid runs. And you see them problem-solving together with a quarterback who has exceptional abilities, but is also playing the best version of the position that he's ever played. Lamar, the same. Ryan is in Gallatin up next. Hey, Ryan.
Yeah, I think Callahan came here because of Levis. He grew up in the NFL. He knows you're attached to the quarterback. He sees what he can do. He could have went to Carolina, I would imagine, and they had the number one pick. And I don't even want to see Malik in preseason. The more he plays, the worse he is.
Well, I think training camp to training camp from his rookie season, we all talked about it. He did improve. The improvements were not enough, and I mean, you can fault him for that if you want to, but I think that's kind of where everybody's just been at with Malik Willis. We'll ask Brian Callahan tomorrow how much Will Levis factored into the decision. He's not going to say none. But is he married to Will Levis? I think, Lucas, you kind of put that into good context yesterday, that so much of how he's viewed is going to be defined by Will. So he matters here, whether or not he's the 10-year future of the Titans or whatever. What he does with Will Levis in his first season as the head coach and in his second season before we figure out whether Levis needs an extension here or not, 3 years into a 4-year deal. It's going to be a big part of this.
Yeah, fair or not, it's going to be how people, I think, determine their opinion of Brian Callahan.
Oh, sure, but it's fair. It's totally fair. Fix it. That's the problem. Well, no, the problem is multifold. But one of the things that magnifies all the other problems that you have is that you can't score. You can't operate. You can't function as an offense. So when Christian Fulton or SMB get beat deep the way that so many corners do for a 50-yard completion or something like that, or give up a defensive pass interference, those problems are magnified and people are screaming mad about a play that, while you don't want it to be routine, is made worse because you're worried you can't keep up. You know you can't keep up. Because, oh, my God, we got to put him back out there behind that offensive line, and he's going to get hit, and we're going to be in a drop-back situation. He's going to take 6 sacks and a half because we can't protect him. Tommy is in Nashville next. Hey, Tommy.
Thanks, Buck. Yeah, I agree. We got a quarterback that can rip it, possibly strong wide receivers. But Callahan's main focus has got to be we don't have an offensive line that can block. I don't care who's back there at quarterback. Unless he can come in and do something about that offensive line, then we're still going to have some major problems. I'm a little bit concerned, and maybe I'm wrong, but the philosophy of Brian Callahan is the fact that Joe Burrow, I believe, was the most sacked quarterback in the NFL last season or the season before that. And that's exactly the same problems we've had here. And I think that that's going to have to be his main focus, other than Will Levis, is who's going to block for him. I'll hang up and listen. Thanks.
Thank you, Tommy. 7 overall is an interesting. It's not quite the Penei Sewell, Jamar Chase decision, right? Where they were picking 4th that year in the draft. I think Jamar
Fifth. Yeah, we talked about it yesterday.
Right. You know, the difference between 5 and 7 is not that great. There will be wide receivers that go before 7. There will be offensive tackles that go before 7.
It's a good wide receiver draft.
I don't know. It's so much easier to find a good wide receiver draft than it is to find a good offensive line draft. You know, and I think that's just a product of the refinement further of quarterbacks and wide receivers than 7-on-7 and how much wider spread that is. And these guys are so much more like honed in, less multi-sport athletes. I think people like talent evaluators talk about this all the time, how you would like to see more well-rounded athletes across the board as opposed to kids who come up just playing wide receiver, just playing quarterback because they think that's their best chance to succeed at the college level or maybe make it pro, whatever. It would be tough. Can you imagine them not taking a tackle at 7? Can you envision a single scenario in which that happens? People would lose their bleep. But the Bengals made a decision that was not that different not that long ago. We'll see.
We know what he prioritizes.
Wide receivers. Scary. 615-737-1045. Last call for phone calls. We'll take them. We'll update the polls. We'll get you to Blaine and Mickey. That's next. Last call for phone calls if you want. Get to some here in just a second. Do you have a question that's sitting on your mind for tomorrow that we haven't talked about? I mentioned the idea of Levis as a selling point, how much it factors in. The analytical approach is going to be discussed tomorrow. I mentioned strength and conditioning, how they're going to adapt potentially or change their thinking on how they move forward, those kind of things. Do you have anything that we've missed?
Well, I know you have said that you believe he will call plays as a head coach.
Yep.
I'd like to hear it from him.
Okay.
Right? And which I expect he'll get a question about that tomorrow.
That's hurtful.
No offense.
Okay. I think that's fair. I'm sure he's going to be asked. Does it matter to you if he says we're not sure yet? Does that have any impact on his hiring here, one way or the other? Like how he answers that question. I think most people are. The assumption is right now his plan is to call plays. We'll see how he answers the question tomorrow. Does it change your thinking at all if he says, we'll get there? Because they won't have an OC hire to announce yet by tomorrow.
Right. I wouldn't have a problem with it because similar to the vision thing, keep your powder dry on it until you know one way or the other. Don't freak out if you don't have an answer just because you don't have an answer.
I can't wait to hit you with that in 2 weeks. 14 days
That's
past,
right.
You're screaming about, I want to know if he's going to call plays or not. We don't know yet because they haven't made anything definitive or haven't given a press conference or put out a statement or something to that effect. I can't wait. Reed is in Nashville next. Hey, Reed.
Hey, guys. I have a question for you. Since Callahan is so, he's an offensive coach, and he has a great history with developing quarterbacks, do you really think that Malik still has a spot on the roster, or is Malik just done with Tennessee?
I don't think it's predetermined. We had some calls in the final hour about this yesterday. I don't think anything about Malik is predetermined right now. This is a fresh start. It feels like. I mean, it is. It's a fresh start for everybody. Now, he's in a different kind of space of his career. This is going to be year 3 already for him. So definitely foot to the fire type of stuff. And he, again, is not on a contract that will have a fifth-year option as a third-round pick. I think it should benefit. The goal should be to benefit all of the quarterbacks, whomever the quarterbacks end up being in March, in July, when they open training camp, when they had the final 53 in September, second week of September.
And in turn, the wide receivers.
Yes.
Burks, Phillips, etc.
Those guys matter more right now than does Malik. But again, if he is salvageable in this new system, if they can make, they're going to have to make pretty considerable leaps with him improvement-wise for him to be able to be a replacement level backup quarterback out there. Because, again, they waved the white flag on him last year. I don't know how much of that is his fault, how much of that is their, just, God, we just need to win a game. Somebody win a game. And they won a game at the end. But I don't think anything about Malik is predetermined. I would still anticipate them sign a quarterback, a veteran quarterback who maybe has played in the system. There's a handful of guys out there who will be bouncing around the league. We were talking during the commercial break. Are there any quarterbacks that we could get in touch with? Dan Orlovsky, A.J. McCarron, guys who have been floating around out there.
Just that have been in a room with Brian Callahan.
I just want to know the impact on them as a position group specifically. Now, do you want to find me for this? Because I did text Dan Orlovsky about this. Is this fine-worthy?
I'll allow it.
Okay. So Dan, who was with him in Detroit, says that he is a fan of Callahan. There's some quotes to that effect, by the way, from a piece that Lucas brought up yesterday in the Athletic. Dan Pompei wrote it, that cites not just Orlovsky, but a couple of different players, including Tebow, that Callahan has coached at that position.
There are no quotes from Tebow, but just examples of how he helped Tebow find his little bit of success he did in the NFL.
Was with him in Detroit. Callahan has been around a bunch of different offenses. This is Dan's text. Watches young players develop. and is a great listener when you have feedback as a player. All of those things matter here. It's the C word.
Cahoots.
Polls, please.
And now, the polls have to be updated. We've reached a crucial point in the show. It's time to update the polls. Take my hand and get to the chopper. Lucas Panzica will give us the final update. Why am I yelling? It's giving me a headache. But it's only a headache. It's not a tumor. Hasta la vista, baby. I'll be back. Why am I yelling?
Presented by Two Rivers Ford, who sells below MSRP on any non-specialty new Ford. How did you react to today's Titans press release about the front office structure? Brian says, I'm good with it. Now let's get the rest of the coaching staff established. Anthony says, I am beyond excited for this offseason, but I still want Derrick Henry back. Adam says they did what Miss Amy said they would do.
Summary, they're going to let Rand cook. Brian Callahan is here to help evolve, and Will Levis, 2 years is the window.
How long are you giving Brian Callahan to turn the Titans into an AFC South contender?
Got ahead of myself.
64% say 1 to 2 years. 36% say 3 or more years.
I think that's the right distribution. 1 to 2. It should be closer to 1 to 2 years than it should be a 3 or 4 year plan, right? Now, I don't know what's standard on coaching contracts, whether it's a 3-year deal, whether it's a 4-year deal. It seems like a lot of coaches on their first contracts get 4-year deals. But I don't know how they're viewing this. I would imagine that it's in the same vein as us, where we're looking around and saying, you hit a draft class right, you should be able to get this thing off the mat in pretty short order.
Did the Titans hire Brian Callahan for Brian Callahan or for the Bengals offense? 37% say they did it for the man, Brian Callahan. 9% say they did it for the scheme, the Bengals offense. But 54% say both, you idiot.
Okay, good. Glad that was established.
How much will Brian Callahan's tenure be defined by Will Levis's success? Kyle says 100%, unless we get a lucky Brock Purdy type late draft gem.
100%, huh? What percentage would you put on that?
90. I think
that high.
Yes, it's huge.
Wow.
It's absolutely a huge part of what will define success for Brian Callahan.
I thought I was over the top of 75. Okay.
Have we not, the whole talk about the runway on Brian Callahan, how long you give him, like what patience? How much patience do NFL owners typically show us they have?
Ask David Tepper.
Right. Or any owner, other than apparently Jerry Jones, who's apparently the most patient owner in the NFL now.
Well, the thing about it is funny, right, that Jerry has always let coaches play out their contracts, basically. Like, they're not extending McCarthy, but they're letting him coach out the final year of his deal to make a determination. It is interesting that Jerry is the type to let that go, right? And that's been the case. It's not like he went crazy with who's my guy? We were just talking about him. Jason Garrett.
Yeah.
Do you like him on TV?
Robotic. Kind of robotic.
The way that he turns to the cameras, they're getting ready to go to commercial
break. He turns
break.
his whole body to the camera.
The smile is what absolutely sends me out of my skin. It's kind of like Uncanny Valley type of stuff. It's like, are you AI? Are you a real person? Are you Dove Kleinman? I'm confused.
And those are the polls.
All right, that's the show. That's a fun one. We had a great time. Hopefully you did too. If you missed any of it, you can check out the podcast. If you want more entertainment, you should stay right there because Blaine and Mickey are next.